Wow. Believe it or not, that was an organ. It might not be how you think organs sound now, but back in 1604, that is how they sounded. Amazing, isn't it? Who'd have thunk it? Hello, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Another week, another episode, another sonnet. Last week we looked at Sonnet 13, which I have to say was very similar to Sonnets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and indeed 12. But this week we have Sonnet 14, which will no doubt be exactly the same again. I am confident that within the next 5 episodes we will veer away from the theme of having kids. I'm confident. I'm going to put it out there. So that's something that we can all look forward to. But until then, here's Sonnet 14. Sonnet 14. Not from the stars do I my judgment pluck, and yet methinks I have astronomy, but not to tell of good or evil luck, of plagues, of dearths, or seasons' quality, nor can I fortune to brief minutes tell, pointing to each his thunder, rain, and wind, or say with princes if it shall go well, by oft predict that I in heaven find. But from thine eyes my knowledge I derive, and, constant stars, in them I read such art as truth and beauty shall together thrive. If from thyself to store thou wouldst convert, or else of thee this I prognosticate, thy end is truth's and beauty's doom and date. That is a nice one, actually. Do they all rhyme? I can't remember. I've sort of lost my mind a little bit with these. They all just sort of roll into one, but this has a real rhyming vibe to it. Do they all rhyme? Hold on, I'm just gonna look back. Least to see. Yeah, I guess they kind of do. You know. Huh. They do. This one sounds much more rhymey than the others, and that is a technical term that I've just used there. So more rhymey just means the rhymes spring out a little bit more than the other ones. So a lot of scholars, Shakespeare scholars, would say Sonnet 14 much more rhymey than the others. I thought I should clarify that. Just I don't want to get too intellectual for the listeners. Right, let's try and pick this one apart, shall we? So it starts with, not from the stars do I my judgment pluck, and yet methinks I have astronomy. So here he's saying, listen, I don't really know much about the stars and what's going on up there, which is usually what astronomers use. But, having said that, I do think that I know a bit of astronomy, which is quite an egotistical thing to say, I think. But, you know, each to their own. Let's continue. But not to tell of good or evil luck, of plagues, of dearths, or seasons' quality. So here he's saying, you know, I can't use my talent to foresee good or bad things. I can't predict plagues or famine or what a season is going to be like, if summer's going to be nice and hot this year. I can't do that, so don't ask me to, all right? Nor can I fortune to brief minutes tell, appointing to each his thunder, rain, and wind. So here he's saying, I can't predict a person's fortunes down to the minute. I'm not. It's not going to be precise. Then he says, or say with princes, if it shall go well, by oft predict that I in heaven find. So here it's sort of, and I can't tell princes whether it's going to go well for them, but I think that means oft predicts that I in heaven find. So he's saying again, it's saying I can't look up into heaven and tell how things are going to go for this prince. But from thine eyes my knowledge I derive. So here he's saying, but actually by looking into your eyes, I can see into the future. And constant stars in them I read such art as truth and beauty shall together thrive, if from thyself to store thou wouldst convert. Now you and I both know where this is going, don't we? We both know where it's going. Guess what Shakespeare thinks that he can predict? So here he's saying, in your eyes I can see that truth and beauty will thrive if you have a kid. And there it is. There it is. Good to hear it. I was worried for a moment that he wouldn't bring up the kids, but thank God he did. Just right there at the end, it comes into play. And now we're on to the final couplet where he says, or else of thee this I prognosticate, thy end is truth's and beauty's doom and date. So this is quite a horrible little ending again. Is what we know and love about Shakespeare and his sonnets at this point. So he says, or else, which is always a threatening thing to say at the end, isn't it? Or else. This is what's going to happen. This is what I predict will happen to you. When you die, truth and beauty will also die with you. Okay? So think about that. Another great sonnet by the great William Shakespeare. I like how he rhymes more in this one. I've said that before, but I think it is nice. It is more apparent in this. I like how he talks about the seasons again. I like how he's just confidently saying, "Yeah, I can, predict the future. I am actually an astronomer in a way, but in my own unique way. I'm not just like all the others that look at the stars. I can look into people's eyes and tell their fortune." So he's basically just bigging himself up in this. He's actually it's a sort of sonnet to just say how great he is, and then tacked on at the end. He's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to say in this one that you should have a kid." Now that's quite enough of that. Let's put this to our story, shall we? If you'll remember last week, we had an absolutely fantastic episode in which Shakespeare went round to John's house with some cards, and he drops them one by one. The cards read out the sonnet, and you might have noticed, that reminds me of a film, a modern day film, and you'd be right. Those keen listeners, you would be right. It is based. The film is based upon this moment. So the film is, of course, Love Actually. If you remember, that guy goes round to Keira Knightley's house, and he has the placards, and he's playing Christmas carols, and is saying how he loves her, but it's fine. Anyway, that was based on Shakespeare reading out Sonnet 13, which is just brilliant. I think it's amazing that they based it upon that, and not many people know that. So you heard it here first. Anyway, so Shakespeare's done that. We know that that his wife is actually in the house. That's why John is saying, just be quiet because I've got a woman here. And Shakespeare, of course, doesn't know it's his wife that he's been sleeping with. He knows that his wife's trying to convince John to have a kid, but he doesn't know that his wife's sleeping with John. Anyway, that's where we left off. Let's dive in. Shakespeare drops the last placard that read out Sonnet 13. It falls to the cobbled floor with a pathetic slap. And John looks at Shakespeare and says, I'm confused, Shakespeare. There's mixed messages in these. Do you want me to have a kid, or do you love me, or I don't understand. Because you're calling me love in these, and if it's more than friendship, then you need to tell me. Shakespeare looks down at his little shoes and then up at John's gorgeous eyes and says, I think I am falling in love with you, John. And John says, wow, this is a bit of a shock. I don't know what to say. And Shakespeare says, have a think about it. All right? And I don't know the solution myself, but I felt like I have to say it. And John says, so all of this stuff about having a kid, that's just been a mask for your feelings about me? And Shakespeare says, oh no, absolutely not. That goes hand in hand with this. I do have feelings for you, I think, but I desperately do want you to have a kid. That's all true. And John says, oh, right, okay, well, it is mixed messages. I wish you'd just written me a love poem. That'd be much nicer. And Shakespeare says, well, I do love you, I think, but also you do just need to have a kid because you're gorgeous. And listen, if I could have children, I'd have a kid with you in a heartbeat. And John says, oh, well, thanks, Shakespeare. That's nice of you. And he says, listen, I actually do want to have a kid. And Shakespeare says, my God, I can't believe it. My sonnets have worked. And he says, well, yes, but here's the problem. I found this lovely woman that I want to have a kid with. She's beautiful and intelligent and funny, and I think it would work. And Shakespeare says, well, great. I mean, I also a little bit worried because I have said that I love you, so I don't want you to fall in love with her too much. And John says, well, we'll see. I haven't said that I love you back. You've told me to go away and think about that, so let's just ease off a moment. And Shakespeare says, okay, what do I need to do to help you? And John says, now, can you give me one of your sonnets so that I can read it to her to persuade her to have a kid with me? And Shakespeare says, you know what? I'll do it. I will do it. And he says, be back in a jiffy. These sonnets only take a few seconds to write anyway. And he runs off home. Of course, little does he know that the woman that John is going to read the sonnet to is his wife. Wow, what a mess. But Shakespeare is dim and hasn't worked out that his wife is the one who's been sleeping with John, even though he asked his wife to persuade John to have a kid. And John, of course, doesn't know that Shakespeare's wife is indeed Shakespeare's wife. A real palaver we've got on our hands here. Anyway, Shakespeare arrives home. He goes up into his writing room and scribbles out Sonnet 14. He skips out of the front door and runs all the way back to John's house. Again, it's a long way, so he's dripping with sweat by the end of it. He really does smell disgusting at this point because he's done a few runs back and forth, and it is miles. But he is a fit guy, so it's okay. He arrives at the door and he wrings out his little beard full of sweat, and it drips onto the cobbled street. John answers the door and he said, "Bloody hell, Shakespeare, that was quick." And he says, "Yep, I can smash these sonnets out. It really isn't a problem." And John says, "Well, fantastic. Give it here." And Shakespeare hands over Sonnet 14 and disappears. John retreats into the bedroom where Shakespeare's wife is waiting. And he says, "I have a sonnet that I would like to read you." And she says, "Oh, really? Wow, okay, let's have a listen, shall we?" He says, "Excellent. I think this will help you make your decision." And she says, "What decision?" He said, "You know, the one I said a few days ago when I said about the baby." And she said, "Oh, okay. Yeah, let's have a listen then." And John pulls out Shakespeare's 14th sonnet and reads, Sonnet 14. Listen. I don't know much about stars, but I reckon I know astrology. Don't get me wrong, I can't foresee good or bad things like plagues or famines, or if it'll be a hot summer. I can't predict people's misfortunes down to the minute. I also can't tell princes if things will go well for them by looking into the sky. But I can see into the future by looking into your eyes. I can see that truth and beauty will thrive if you pass on all your great attributes to a kid. Otherwise, I predict this. When you die, the truth and beauty will die with you. Well, well, well. What a predicament John, Shakespeare, and Shakespeare's wife are in. What a messy story this has become. I am looking forward to what will happen next week. Will Shakespeare's wife have the child with John? Will Shakespeare find out that his wife is having a child with John? Will John find out that Shakespeare's wife is Shakespeare's wife? Find out next week. Bye.